What's up, everybody? It's Soren Baker here on Unique Access Entertainment. As always, please hit that subscribe button. It's right down there and it's free. That enables us to keep coming to y'all as often as possible with as many interviews as possible. So please hit that subscribe button. Now, today, we have the honor and privilege of being joined by Linda Wills. Thanks for coming through.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yes, yes, it's an honor and privilege. Shout out to the mayor, Chris Thomas. I'm on his radio show out of Vegas. Definitely tune in if you're in the Vegas area. Check us out with the top-notch all-star team with Terminator X, DJ Mad Links, Nooney LaRue, Layla Lopez, etc. And shout out to producer Tony Medley. But Linda has this new book. Definitely check it out, The Great Record Promoter. It's available on Amazon worldwide. Definitely check it out if you haven't already. But that's part of what we'll be talking about a lot today. So, Linda, one of the things that I enjoyed and appreciated about the book was the family saying that you had, where there's a wills, there's a way. So, so break down how, what your early memory of that is and how that's factored into your life.
Well, because my family's last name is Wills, and there are always things that has to be done by everybody, and everybody has to find a way to do things. So our family motto became, "Where there's a wills, there's a way," which meant there's no excuse for you to get something done because you are wills. There's a wills, and you have a will. There's a way.
Okay. And do you
And it was
remember?
comforting. It was comforting. It was educational. So we did it intentionally. And then it just became a part of how we dealt with situations. Anything that we thought may have been too hard, we would always reflect on where there's a wills, there's a way.
And do you know who in the family gets credit for that?
Sure, my mommy and my daddy, my family, yes, definitely, my parents.
Okay. Well, speaking of your mom, you do talk about her multiple times throughout the Great Record Promoter, and you also talk about that she stressed that you were not going to be able to rely on others, even a man, that wasn't an option. So, as you got older and throughout your life, why do you realize that that message from your mom was so important to who you became?
You know what? Because, my mom was married, to my father, and then they had their ups and downs, and their ins and outs. So she just wanted to groom me as a young girl, not to depend on anybody, not even a husband. So she says, Linda, when I was 14 years old, she sat me down. She says, Linda, whatever you do not depend on other people to do things for you, especially a man. She said, depend on yourself and get it for yourself. And then in that way, you won't feel disappointed because somebody didn't do something for you because you should have the will to do things for yourself. Not saying that other people can't help you, but she's just saying be independent and not dependent. And I've felt that way all of my life. I mean, I've never been married. I mean, I have a kid. I mean, I have a son, and but I've always been single. I've always worked. I've always gone to school. I've always done a lot on my own. And I think because I was raised that way, and so I don't have to depend on other people. I mean, you have to depend on people for some things, because you're not everything. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you have to work with other people, but for the most part, to take care of my living, my job, to take care of my living quarters, condos, bills, and things like that. I basically rely on myself to make sure that things get done. And I think it's good for everybody to grow up to be independent. There's nothing wrong with having a partner, which is a good thing. But if something happens to that partner, you still have to be able to survive on your own. So
Yeah.
always have a level of independence in your pocket.
Yeah. It's always a good idea. Shout out to your mom for that. It's
Absolutely.
And with your mom, also, you talked about how she really encouraged you to pursue your dreams. And I wanted you to break down because, as you know, and people may know, oftentimes women aren't always encouraged to that, especially decades ago. So, how and what did that mean to you, and what did you come to understand that to mean?
Well, see, my mom has six kids. Well, my parents had six kids, five boys and myself. So she was always talking to me. I mean, my brothers were trained to, but I think she was more interested in training me because I was the only girl, and she know how it is. When you out there in that world, people are promising you this or promise you that, or they lying to you, and they just doing a lot of different things. And so, she told me to make sure I get a good education. She says we can't afford to send all of you all to college. So she says when you finish high school, get a job. She says attend a trade school because if you go to a trade school, you're not going to go to college. You go to the trade school, you get a trade, and you will always be able to get a job because a trade is a specialty. So she encouraged that. So I wanted to be a nurse. And so I went to a vocational school to take up nursing. But after the first year of home nursing, I was too squeamish for it. I mean, I couldn't see myself giving somebody a needle because I didn't even like getting needles myself, or looking at blood. So I was able to change my trade to secretarial training because I used to like the way secretaries look. I had a thing for people that wore uniforms. If you were in the Navy, the Marines, the fire department, the secretary, I just had a thing for neatness. And so I says, well, maybe I can become a great secretary. And so I went into that field because, like, she encouraged me, go to a trade school if you're not going to go to college, and you can find your way from there. And that's exactly what I did. I was able to change my trade. Um, and I was stenographer. I could take shorthand. I knew how to use a dictaphone. I could type. So I knew how to work in the office. And after that, I was offered a job working for the federal government, the Federal Communications Commission. I didn't even apply for the job because I had to take an exam downtown. They called it the civil service at that time. Now they call it OPM. So I had to take an examination to become in order for me to graduate because I took the trade for 2 years. You're supposed to stay in your trade for 3 years, but I had some favoritism from some of the faculty. And so I was able to do it for 2 years. I took the exam downtown. I passed the exam. My name and my rating was posted on the board, and I received a letter in the mail from the Federal Communications Commission to start working for them as soon as I, graduated from high school as a stenographer. And I worked with them for like 5 years. And lo and behold, when I met Al Green, and eventually we became friends, he needed a secretary and he hired me. So my career has really taken me far from being a stenographer to working as a personal secretary for Icon Entertainment.
Yeah. Well,
So
well, you talk about Al Green in your book, The Great Record Promoter, that everybody can get on Amazon and elsewhere now. But the thing about it with meeting Al Green is somebody you talk about in The Great Record Promoter, you loved his music and you were a big fan of his. What have you seen throughout your life and your career and working in the music industry, the difference of today meeting a celebrity where, you can see them all the time and stuff versus back then where it wasn't as much seen or even understood about the person or the celebrity at the time.
I mean, it was kind of like the same, that backstage scene has not changed. That's how I met Al Green. I went to the show, but I had already premeditated. I already had it in my mind that I was going to meet him one way or another. And I guess it happened by osmosis because, we were standing out backstage after the show, just chit chatting. Me and a couple of my friends wound up meeting his bus driver. He came over to us, started the conversation. We talked with him. He asked us if we want to go backstage, and we did. It's that same thing. From back in the day, meeting celebrities, it's the same. But now a lot of people also, the change is the celebrities now go to strip clubs. And so a lot of, the women in the strip clubs, get an opportunity now to deal with the entertainers. When back in the day, that was taboo. Anybody, that works in a strip club, it wasn't a lot of that. But that's the way that you can get them. And then online now, you have Amazon. I mean, not Amazon, but you have the internet. And a lot of these entertainers, they post things on the internet. So you can send your picture. And, that's basically the new way where you can meet, an artist now is online as opposed to like meeting them backstage outside at a show.
Okay. And then also in the Great Record Promoter, you do talk about some of the difficulties of your relationship with Al Green and course, people famously know some of his episodes as well. But that being said, how was it like for you getting to know someone and working with someone and then having to deal with the not being a fan of theirs? Because it's like people say, it's sometimes it's hard to meet people you admire and then you end up having problems with them or don't like them. What was that like for you to
I
navigate?
mean, well, with Al Green, I mean, I was a fan from day one. When I first heard "I'm So Tired of Being Alone," I became a fan. I fell in love with that record. It's like that record was talking about my life. I was in a relationship, but I was still felt alone. You know how you can be with somebody and still be lonely? And so, that record really ministered to me. And then he and I, we became friends, and I got a chance to kind of know him. I mean, he offered me a job like 4 months, after he and I became close friends. But even from there, after I left him, I still wanted to be interested in working in the music industry. I went back to the federal government. Then um, I went to school. I got a grant to go to American University, and I wound up getting an internship at a radio station with Donnie Simpson, WKYS radio station. And there I learned record promotions, how records get played, how these promotion reps are going to the radio station and sit down with the program director and the music director and give them a story and give them a presentation. And I said, you know what? This is what I want to do when I get back in the music industry. I want to become a record promoter. So I signed up to go to the Jack the Rapper, which was a conference that they always had in Miami, Florida. I signed up. I went down there on my own. I went to a couple of the panel sessions. At one of the sessions, I just stood up and I asked, how come you don't have a lot of women as record promoters as you do men? But of course, they really weren't able to answer my questions because it was kind of like taboo to have women, being promotion reps. You know how they try to leave women out of everything. But anyway, um, somebody said, well, because you might get compromised at the radio station. I say, look, men compromise me walking down the street. So that's no excuse. Women get compromised all the time. So just being in that game, that's not a solid answer for me. But eventually, this guy walked up to me when I was just sitting in the lobby and he said, so you want to be a record promoter, huh? I said, yes, I do. And he happened to be well known. His name was Joe Medlin. He was a legend in the record industry. And he gave me some pointers. And so he suggested that I talk to Roy Ayers because Roy Ayers at that time had his own record label called Uno Melodic Records. He says, give Roy Ayers a call. And I didn't know Roy Ayers and he didn't know me. So I'm sure Joe finally set it up. Because when I did call Roy and talk to him about it, he gave me a job to be his local promotion rep to promote his records. And from there, I mean, sky is the limit. I mean, I worked for him. I did a great job. Then one of the promotion reps that was working for a distributor, Schwartz Brothers, they would distribute records for all the independent labels. At first, they would distribute records even for the major labels because the major labels didn't have their own distribution network set up. So anyway, to make a long story short, the promotion rep for Schwartz Brothers approached me and he offered me a job. He wanted me to take his position. And so I took his position. And when that happened, I mean, like doors just swung wide open to me. I started working with all types of artists, Dougie, Salt-N-Pepa, N.W.A, Dramatics, every artist that had a label that was on an independent label that needed record distribution, they would come to Schwartz Brothers because they were the biggest distributor in the market. But if you come to Schwartz Brothers, you had to have a promotion rep like myself to promote the records on the radio in order for the distributor to be able to put the product in the stores so the stores could sell it. So if you didn't have a promotion rep that's getting the records played, well, what good is it having a whole bunch of records in your warehouse and nobody hears the records? And so
Yeah.
the record promoter is really the glue behind artists becoming celebrities, behind record companies making lots of money, because we were the first line of defense. Those program directions, they didn't have the music. We took the music in there and then we did our jobs to get that music played. And one thing I would like to say is when artists do interviews, they never mention record promoters, the work that was actually done to get them to where they are. They always references it as if they were the ones who did all of the work. And that's the reason why I wrote the first book, The Great Record Promoter Behind the Scenes in the Record Industry, to let people know that there was some people behind the scenes that was making that happen. And then I was teaching people also how to get your records promoted in the radio stations.